I'm Deborah Scott Anderson, and I am the founder of Climate Gardens, which I have evolved out of a blog over the last 10 to 12 years. So, Climate Gardens is as it sounds, it's about gardening and climate change. But over the last 10 years, it's been evolving into more of an interactive online and off experience. So, Climate Gardens is trying to get the UK's 30 million gardeners to understand and feel empowered to be more sustainable, act on climate change, and just bring the fact that they love their gardens, they love nature, and every day they step outside into their gardens, they're interacting with climate change. And we're using that experience to actually empower people to do more sustainable things, not just in their gardens, but also in their homes. As I said, it started as a blog. I did some research 12 years ago, realized that gardeners were struggling with shifting climate, started writing this blog, got some funding from Unlimited, which is a really good organization. I'm sure Suzanne will tell you about that, to set up the blog. It went really well. I actually started getting more hits from America, which was amazing. And the thing about blogs is you can see where your target audience is coming from. It's a really good place to research, but who am I speaking to? Where would this business go if I expanded it? So I spent about 4 or 5 years just writing blogs, researching, and you can use tools, all free tools, Google, lots of other platforms. And then I started to work out where my audience was and who they were. And then I decided that I needed to take it offline into the real world. So I'd worked out that my target audience was 60 plus gardeners who had disposable income, actually not just in the UK, but I focused on the UK. So I decided to apply to build a garden at the Hampton Court Flower Show. I thought that's the place to be. Jumped out of the blog. So I found a great designer because I'm not a garden designer. My background's actually in PR. But the idea was to get the concept out there to the public and test again who was responding, what they were saying. And the great thing was that we chose a year, 2016, when actually it was a very hot summer that year. So it was a bit like this year. And it was a perfect time to have a climate change garden. And it was a risk. It could have rained, but it was absolutely boiling. And we created this garden called Near Future Garden. It was about renewable energy gardens. And we had 10,000 people walk in our garden. And that was our market research. We weren't talking to everyone, but we were saying, what are you interested in? What are these changing experiences you're having? How do they make you feel? So we did an awful lot of research. And then the BBC approached us and they did a 3-minute feature on peak time viewing, and we got 1.5 million viewers. And it was like, wow, we've really jumped out of the computer now. So that was 2016. Since then, I've been running workshops because gardeners are really chatty people. They'll chat online, but you get them in a room, can't stop them. So I've been running a series of workshops called Future Workshops. And these have been a mixture of speakers, garden speakers, but also I'm now a climate change coach. So one of the things about the green economy, it is about having knowledge of that sector and understanding your target audience, and then working out what knowledge do I need? Because it isn't a specialist area, but you do need to acquire a certain amount of knowledge. So I've attended various workshops and I'm now a climate change coach. So in these workshops, we do group coaching and we get individuals to engage with how gardens make them feel. And gardens are planted for the future. So most of our target audience have big gardens and they are planning for their grandchildren to inherit this space. And then we interact with them to say, well, how would you feel if you couldn't keep that garden going? How does that make you feel about your grandchildren's future? So it's not making them feel guilty, but it's tapping into a nerve. And coaching, if anyone's ever been a coach, is about making people's emotions come into an action. Journey has been a long journey because as well as doing that, I've been holding down a job. And this is what I think is a great way to test your market. So I am actually a coach, I'm a careers coach, but I have spent the last 10 to 12 years doing so much market research, seeing what's happening in the green economy market, the trends that are happening, and also understanding what gardeners, these 30 million gardeners, it's amazing to think that half the population in England garden.
Except for me.
For you, you're not a gardener. Okay. Oh. And I do believe that, the reason I haven't actually launched a proper website is because I didn't believe I had enough information to know what style of website and what those people who were connecting with me actually needed. So I do urge people not to jump into this, partly because the green economy is changing very quickly. So the consumer market, as you know, is all about sustainability. It's all the buzzwords that you have to understand. But there's a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon and using this word sustainability, green. And, the serious consumers that I speak to, they see through all that. So it's really important, I think, to ride the trend that sustainability isn't a word, it's actually an action. And companies really need to demonstrate that they're doing the right thing, not just doing it to make money. So at the moment, I'm working with a branding expert because we've decided, I say we, that's the other thing. I've done all of this mainly on my own.
Yeah.
And one of my big things I've struggled with is I think it's great to have a business partner.
Mm.
I think when you're launching or working on something, it's great to have someone to discuss. I mean, Suzanne and Mark are a perfect example of that. And I do feel that previously my business was with someone, and I am at the stage now where I'm feeling I need to bring someone in who's got different skills to me. So I'm very much an outward person. I sort of need someone who's more operational. So that's the stage I'm at. But the branding we're doing is because we've worked out that we need to expand our brand. And it's quite interesting that we are doing this now as the energy crisis is happening, because we're going to be called climate homes and gardens.
Oh, interesting.
Because most people who have gardens have a home. It's very rare that people, apart from allotments, obviously. And so the target market research that we've done has made us realize that there's an awful lot of sustainable issues around home, obviously, energy, solar powered, electric cars, that our target audience would also be interested in. So we're at the stage, I say we, it's the branding expert.
Yeah.
And this is why I would also urge people not to jump in with the first idea that comes into your mind for the green economy, because it is shifting and changing so quickly. And you do need to test your concept out there before you sort of commit a lot of money to getting that brand, launching a website, or your identity. So I have been building up my reputation, and I think having the garden on TV. Also, I've been interviewed for a couple of radio programs. It's helping me to understand my target audience and how I can deliver the right product. It's not really a product, I suppose it's a community. I'm trying to build a community. But my biggest issue has been finance.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just want to rewind because you've said so much there. I just want to unpick some of that stuff because I think, firstly, it starting off with a blog is not the traditional route that one thinks about when they think about starting a product or a service.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I know as a very early blogger myself is that a blog or any form of posting content on a regular basis can create trust, right? It helps to build trust with your audience. They get to know you, and you get to start to identify the people that are commenting, viewing, interacting with you, asking questions. And as you said, it is one way of discovering who your target market may be. And one of the things that I've noticed just generally in terms of doing a lot of posting of content is you start to see the themes come through that are getting the most hits, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
so you'll do, especially when you do this over a very long period of time, you start to identify using Google Analytics or just any other analytics oh, these posts seem to be really
Yeah,
popular, but these posts are, nobody seems to be very
exactly.
interested in that. So you can start then to kind of curate your concept around the popularity of your
Yeah.
content and what is driving people to view it and the kind of engagement you're getting. So that's one thing that I think is really interesting that you said. And obviously blogging has gone through so many different iterations
Yeah.
now, and people are I do a
Videos.
newsletter and people do podcasting. So when we talk about blogging, for me, talking about blogging is a bit just talking about posting regular
Yeah,
content
exactly.
in some way. Could be video, it could be audio,
Absolutely.
it could be text. So the old fashioned way I associate blogging, which is just writing on Blogspot, which nobody will even remember anymore, is is a really interesting way to just turn, figure out your content. And then the second thing I thought that was interesting is that you went for something quite strong, quite a big aspiration going to the garden show and say, I'm going to go from this blog, that I'm doing. And what's my next move? Oh, my next move is I'm going to do this massive garden and I'm going to get BBC coverage and I'm going to get, 10,000 people coming through it and blah, blah. Most people would not have that tremendous leap of confidence to be able to execute that. What I'm just curious as to how that, how that thought just was that your PR brain? Do you
I
think?
think it was the PR brain, and I just felt I needed to really just throw it out there and see it would either land well or it would be a disaster. And as I say, we managed to choose the right summer, and I feel that that was a big turning point. So don't be afraid to actually do something that you think is completely mad. And I, when I started talking to the designer, I thought, what the hell am I doing? But it was a big turning point, and it also made me realize how I was underestimating my audience because I was just tapping into I was on the front page of Google rankings, I was on 4th, but I thought, no, that's not enough. I need to get out there. So don't be afraid to step outside and think, I'm just going to go for it.
And that requires, well, it requires a certain amount of confidence to be able to do that, definitely. It also requires, I think, the ability to acknowledge that it might not land, right?
Exactly.
And if it does,
Risk.
if it doesn't land, then, well, that's taught you something.
Exactly.
But it did land, and that in, when you see that degree of enthusiasm for something that you're creating, it can't help, I suspect, just making you go, I've got something here.
It was amazing. It was like, how could I bottle this and not let anyone else get it? And of course, it's not a unique concept, and lots of people now are doing similar things. But I feel it's about timing, I think, with the creative economy. And it is about choosing your moment. And, because it's an evolving sector and it will continue to, get bigger, but will also be very niche. I mean, my project, my idea is niche, but there are potentially 30 million people who'd be interested.
Yeah. And when I think about gardens, because I am not a garden person, and obviously at the moment we are living through a summer where people are talking about water shortages and all of that sort of thing, I immediately think about the amount of energy it takes to maintain a garden.
Absolutely.
That's what my immediate
Mm,
thought is,
mm,
that anyone who has a beautiful garden
mm,
needs to water it. They need
mm.
to spend money on products that are really potentially dangerous for the environment. They need to do all sorts of things that fundamentally are not aligned with nature. For me, the first thought that went into my head when you talked about climate garden was around getting people to appreciate and understand how to protect and maintain and make their gardens beautiful without harming the
Yep.
environment and
It's adapting, but also it's a sort of education program in a way, because a lot of gardeners think they love nature, but then they go out and use a petrol mower, and so it's the things don't sort of line up in your mind. And the target audience, as I said, is 60 plus. It's very much about legacy as well.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I think legacy for, people of a certain age, is becoming quite a big thing. We were the generation that enjoyed, if you like, a sort of fossil environment without the guilt that went with it.
Yeah.
And that's what's been my driver, that I feel I not that I owe it, but I want my grandchildren to say, well, grandma did her best, you know, and I think that's a big thing for a lot of generational gardeners.
Yeah. And I think also within the green economy, we have to acknowledge that the challenges that we face on a global level are humongous, right? They're huge.
Yes.
We can't underestimate how humongous they are. And it can feel, and I know working with an aging population, trying to solve to a small extent issues around employment and working for a much longer period of your life than we ever thought we were going to have to or need to, that for a lot of us, it's about what are the small steps that I can take and the change that I am comfortable I can make without feeling like I'm overwhelmed by the catastrophe
Yeah.
it is, climate
Yeah.
and all
Yeah.
of everything around that. So how did you reconcile that? And how do you reconcile that yourself with your business?
Yes, that is a very key communication issue with the words climate change.
Yeah.
You mentioned climate change and suddenly people switch off, which
Yeah.
is why sustainability is a more comfortable word. So I think the vocabulary you use with your business in the green economy is key. I have looked at taking the word climate out of my brand, but we've actually decided to keep it in. So that feeling that engaging with people in a positive, empowering way, that we're not going to overwhelm you with facts and figures about how awful it is.
Yeah.
It's all about optimism and small steps and making these gardeners feel, well, I'm in a great position. I can do something.
Yeah.
Now, why wouldn't I? Not, oh, I don't want to hear about climate change. So we don't go into any of the heavy stuff, the doom and gloom. And that was why the garden at Hampton Court was so good, because it was a beautiful garden and it was an uplifting experience. And that's why the workshops are the same. We have them in very beautiful gardens,
Yeah.
in famous country houses, and people feel inspired that. So the UK is historically the gardening country of the world. Anyone who's a gardener from anywhere in the world thinks that English gardeners know everything about gardening. So that's another heritage thing that we've got, that we are in a position where we can use that for the future.
Yeah.
So we really mustn't, if we're building businesses in the green economy, what's the word? Make people feel depressed, defeatist. It's got to be about optimism and empowerment, that we can all make a small difference. And I think that's why I do this, because the more people I speak to, I say, well, it isn't all doom and gloom. We can all do our bit.
Yeah.
So it's really important that you have the right language.
And in terms of, we'll come to the funding shortly, but you mentioned that you do this work alongside, more income generating businesses, and you're a climate coach and you mentor people. How much time are you able to devote to this? And yeah, I mean, how do you juggle it?
Well, I think it's part of being an entrepreneur, isn't it, really? So I ran my own business before and I had two small children. So I know what it's like to allocate certain days. So I just allocate 3 days a week for my earning the money. You know, I book my coaching sessions, and then I use the other 4 days a week, whether they're weekends, weekdays, to try and slot in. So at the moment, I'm doing sort of not half and half, but I'm earning enough in 3 days to mean that in those 4 days, I can have a headspace that allows me to do my research and my blogging. But I have got to the point now where if I do build it to the next level, which is what we're talking about, it is that balancing act. So it is something you really have to structure, I think, have set days. But of course, emails come in on days when so it is learning to manage that. But I've always sort of had my own business or worked freelance. So I think I'm quite good at multitasking.
Yeah.
And I do it on my own. So that's the other thing. That's why I want someone else to come on board. But I do believe that if you're setting up a green business, you do need to do a lot of research. So make sure you give yourself enough time before you even get to that stage of operating.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you've had some funding like I have from SSE, very small amount of funding.
Yes.
Very slightly more funding from Unlimited we had recently. So that was nice. Yeah, but I mean, funding is a challenge. How have you incorporated your business? What structure have you decided upon?
Well, that's another thing that's under discussion. So I was a sole trader for many years because
Oh,
I just didn't want to commit to which way I was going to go. Was it going to be community interest? And also the government kept changing and giving different opportunities. And, a not-for-profit was the plan originally. And I thought, why do I want to be a not-for-profit? Look, I want to make some money.
yeah.
So at the moment, that's under discussion with a specialist guy, actually, who I would recommend. I won't give out his name because you'll be inundated, but I'm happy to refer to people to. He also used to work for the School for Social Entrepreneurs,
Oh, right.
and he sets up legal requirements and he advises you where to fit. So again, that's a very important thing. And I think the SSE are quite good for that, aren't they? As well as money, they can give you some advice.
Yeah, I mean, I've set up numerous businesses in numerous legal structures, and I've made some serious errors in judgment in that area. So I feel quite qualified to do that myself. And I also,
There we are.
and I do, I do tend to, but but if you're not set up as one thing or another, whether it's a CIC or a company limited by guarantee or by shares or whatever, you
Yeah.
have to be charitable, then it can restrict your funding. I mean,
Right.
that's the biggest issue about all of this stuff is
Mhm.
that until you start figuring out a way to generate the revenue on a regular, ongoing basis,
Sure.
then it's always a bit of a hand to mouth thing. And so, we have been quite successful in getting small pots of money from various places. And part of that was our decision to just, be a not for profit,
Yeah,
frankly,
I agree.
because, and that can limit you or not, but it does depend. It is something that's definitely, I always say to people, remain a sole trader for as long as you can.
That's what I've done.
Once you make that decision, it's very difficult to then start changing. So I always think it's best to do that. So just getting,
Can I just add one thing on that? So I do know because I work in the space, I work for a business school in London. I do know that there's a lot now, a big expansion of private investors, angel investors, VCs who are looking for green startups,
yeah,
basically.
yeah,
And they want to make money, obviously.
yeah, for sure.
So that's a real growth area. And I feel that that's a great time now that if you do have a really good business idea, yeah, and you don't want to go the not-for-profit, there are private investors. Obviously, you have to give them access to your company and shares, but there's a lot more funding in that area now.
Yeah, less of that funding available if you're an older woman, I have to say, than there are.
Nice.
Speaking as someone who's had equity funding, uh,
Okay.
I
Okay.
just, I really can't. Somebody wrote the other day about just a feminine hygiene product that, had like, could help, 50% of all the women in the world quite in a big way. And, has raised 1.2 million and just can't get beyond that. So I think funding is a bigger story, whole nother conversation.
It is, I
But
agree.
my final question is about how do you see the opportunity for you to monetize this in the way that will give you, if you want to, the ability to move into this full time? Where do you see it?
It's got to be online, I feel. It's got
Yeah.
to be generating something online because the thing about the workshops, they're great for building communities and getting people, but they're a lot of work.
Yeah.
You have to get sponsors on board. And I feel the amount of effort I put into the workshops. So we're exploring this online revenue generation now. And I've actually been working via the School for Social Entrepreneurs with PwC on some concepts. Luckily, they gave me a free business mentor from PwC.
Oh, nice.
So I believe the online, but it's the format, isn't it? It's how you generate that without selling your soul to Google ads and Facebook ads. So we have some concepts which we're going to trial.
Yeah.
But there's another expense as well, because you have to build these platforms, or you have to buy in the software, and then you have to buy in the technology experts.
Yeah.
I think that building an online green business is not going to probably be my most exciting venture. And I have got my eyes on doing a garden at Chelsea now.
Oh, good. Great.
Because I thought I've done Hampton Court, why not do Chelsea?
Well, why not? I think that's a grand ambition, and why not? And it's been lovely. It's been lovely to speak with you. And yeah, it sounds brilliant. And I really look forward to, I wish somebody would come around and give me a nice sustainable garden. But I suspect mine is pretty sustainable, actually, because I don't do it.
I'm doing something. Right. No mow, no nothing. Natural gardens are actually what we should, but most UK gardeners are not into that.
That's mine.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.